Good afternoon. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. I'm really excited to share this panel with this wonderful woman. Before this meeting, I was talking with each one of them, and I really learned a lot of what they are doing to change women's life. So thank you very much for being here. So I would like to start telling you that this summer, France, Mexico, and UN Women co-organized the Generation Equality Forum. There was a consensus among participants on the fact that existing gender inequalities have widened due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Women have more unstable jobs with lower salaries and a high degree of job informality. Women also have to do more unpaid domestic work and suffer for higher levels of violence at home. Today, our guests will share their unique perspectives on how to address these problems by bringing together solutions from government, civil society organizations, multilateral organizations, and the private sector. I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists of this day. First of all, I want to present you Elizabeth Moreno. She is Minister Delegate for Equality, Diversity, and Equal Opportunity in the governments of France. Be very welcome, Elizabeth. Barbara Lavernos, he is Deputy CEO at L'Oréal. Alison Burns, she is CEO of Village Capital, whose Women's Entrepreneur Accelerator is one of the future projects at the Paris Peace Forum. Ingrid Gabriela Joven, we have her in a remote way, and she's member of the board of the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIC, and who also represent the project Tech Detector. And Trisha, my dear friend and colleague, we both are part of the governance structure of the Paris Peace Forum. She leads the steering committee, and from the very beginning, I've been part of the executive committee of the Paris Peace Forum. And let me talk a little bit about me. I am Mexican. I lead a Mexican think tank oriented to policy analysis and recommendations. So, without further introduction, let's begin with the first question to kick off the discussion. Elizabeth, I know you have a lot of things to share. I know that you were an active participant in the Generation Equality Forum, and I would like to know what are your takeaways from the forum. But I will also like, if we have time, that you share a little bit of your experience. I heard about it and I understood the challenges we face every day, and I really appreciate if you take a minute to share about your own experience. Of course, your takeaways about the forum, but a little bit of your history. And you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's my real pleasure to share this panel this afternoon, as you said, with all these talented women, and on such an important topic today that is on the public speaking environment. Everybody's speaking about gender equality, and I think this is really because we realized, particularly during this pandemic time, that no country in the world can pretend that he is treating his women the same way he is treating its men. And I really believe that this pandemic is a kind of wake-up call, and I'm glad that we finally managed to have this generation equality forum, because it allowed us to speak about a lot of things. So maybe you know that President Macron has decided that let's say, gender equality would be the great cause of his mandate. Hence, we have taken multiple measures to accelerate gender equality in France, and we have particularly addressed sexist and sexual violence, because there is no equality possible if every 2 days you have a woman dying because she is killed by a man. And we have also addressed the economic empowerment of women, because that's the best way for them to take their destiny on hands. And in 2018, France has adopted a feminist diplomacy that embodied through the Generation Equality Forum. This event happened at exactly the right time for 2 reasons. The first one is the one that I mentioned. The pandemic has been absolutely terrible for the entire world, but it has been particularly tough for women. And the second reason is that we have had to wait 26 years after Beijing to gather the world together on the topic of gender equality. Hence, the GEF arrived at the right moment, and it was organized actually around several innovative action principles. First, it was co-organized with feminist civil society around inclusive governance for all decision-making. It helped bring a new vision of multilateralism through action around concrete action, because if you manage to have women treated well in one part of the world and not in the other part, it can't work. And it also brought together multi-stakeholders partnership. I'm thinking about states, feminist civil society and youth organizations, international organizations, philanthropic organizations, and the private sector that Barbara will speak about in a few minutes. And regarding the key takeaways to your question, the forum was structured around 6 themes identified as priorities for gender equality. I'm thinking about gender-based violence, about justice and economic rights, feminism, action for climate, technology and innovation for gender equality, feminist movement, and leadership. Because if you speak about equality without the power that are given to women to take their destiny on hands, it can't work. And we have a compact topics on the issue of women, peace and security, and humanitarian action that has been created finally. And one of the key takeaways is the forum, the fact that the forum managed to raise $40 billion, representing the largest investment ever made for the benefit of gender equality at the global level. Through the Global Acceleration Plan for Equality, governments and public sector institutions have pledged $21 billion investment for gender equality. You know, I come from the professional environment. I have spent 30 years of my life working in the civil society, and we know that money is everything. You can have the best ambition. If you do not have money to realize this ambition, it simply can't work. And in addition to these, to its role as co-chair of the forum, France has made a series of international commitments within the Coalition for Action on Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. And we have committed also to the education of girls by announcing a contribution of 333 million euro as part of the Global Partnership for Education. And we are absolutely determined to maintain our full commitment on this topic of gender equality, because when women are treated correctly, it is the entire society that takes benefit of it. UN Women provides all the secretariat work, as well as the global accountability work around all action coalition, because now that the decisions have been made, the money have been collected, we need to make sure that the actions are really properly executed. And we have a midterm milestone in 2023, followed by an overall assessment in 2026. But indeed, we cannot afford waiting until 2023. We must maintain a multilateral mobilization, and this Paris Forum is indeed an occasion. You didn't mention that you have been part of the co-founders of this forum. Women never say everything they do, and I just wanted to mention it. So France is now ready with all its partners to make this equality topic a reality that is concrete, not only for women, but also for girls.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We will have a second round of interventions in order that you choose one of these themes and go profoundly. Thank you. And now, Barbara Lavernus, he's, as I told you, the deputy CEO of L'Oréal. And L'Oréal was just recognized by the French government. They received a recognition for its leadership for gender equality. Mm-hmm. So I would like to ask you, which are your practices in the corporate world? But first, if you can explain, what did you do in the pandemic, during the pandemic? Did you have specific actions? Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you, Edna, for your question. Obviously, we take our share during the pandemics, such as we have to do, because, as mentioned perfectly by Elizabeth and with my colleagues, it's the funds, NGOs, government, and the private sectors that have to cope together to make things happen in the real world. So, what we did at L'Oréal during the pandemic, because a crisis is never gender neutral, and we all acknowledge that this crisis really brought against women with increase around the world about violence, but also they had to stay home, more domestic work, and let's say that the unpaid care had also increased all over the place. So for L'Oréal on our side, what we did, and the first thing was Internally, first thing was really to make sure 100% our roughly 90,000 employees were all paid, 100%, women and men. And then within our own place, within our own company, it was us about understanding that we have to play to prevent and to support women's victim of violence. Elizabeth mentioned it. It's very important. So that's why we joined the initiative 1 in 3 Women, the European Business Network of companies that united to end gender-based violence, but also with EY and Accor, we launched the Stop E initiative to fight against sexism in the workplace. And finally, we partner with the NGO CARE, and we join forces to support the International Labour Organization adaptation to the first ever global convention against violence and harassment at work, because it exists also at work, and we have first, as said, to work internally in our own territories. Then it's beyond. We have also external towards our ecosystem, a call for action as private sector, and during the COVID, for sure, we had to act, and you were just mentioning that commitments are nice, action are better, and therefore we need some money. So we decided to dedicate a fund of 50 million euro in the summer 2020 during the pandemic towards women. So we had this L'Oréal fund for women to escape poverty, to achieve social and professional integration, but also to have access to emergency assistance for refugees for those women. And with this fund, we partner with hundreds charities, NGOs, bodies in 30 countries worldwide. And together we focus in helping women gain access to education, achieve social and professional integration, preventing domestic and sexual violence, poverty during amidst this pandemic. We have supported about 1 million women and girls globally in this past year. In 2020, we work with organizations including Women Without Borders in Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Zanzibar, and Kosovo to empower women to recognize situations of violence in their local community, because it has been very hard during this pandemic. And finally, we partner with the UNHCR to help more than 1,100 displaced women around the world fighting against sexual abuse in Thailand, protecting victims of sexual violence and discrimination in Colombia, also enacting in Argentina. So you see, it's action within our own internal company, but it's also how we can act, partner with NGOs, and give money to help women and girls around the world.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Very interesting, the insights and the experience you share with us. Mm-hmm. I really hope that all the corporate world assume these practices, mm-hmm, as a way of doing good for the community, to enhance productivity and well-being of the people that work within this realm. It's a turn for the intervention of Ingrid Gabriela Hoven. As I told you, she's part of the board of GIZ. And I would like very much to hear about your initiative of data collection and how can we use this data to create a new evidence-based narrative around the added value of investing in women-led initiatives. You have the floor, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Edna, and I hope that you can see me live now. I just see my... Can you hear me and can you see me?
I can hear you and I can see you. So please go ahead.
Perfect.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Perhaps, to start with, I'm happy to be invited for this very interesting and exciting panel. I would like to start especially with the issue of economic empowerment, which you already alluded to, that especially during the pandemic, one has seen that women has been disproportionately hit by the pandemic in their economic and social life. So apparently, and this is, although this is of course very dramatic, it also helps to raise awareness and again to update data that is necessary to take the right decision. And more globally speaking, what we can see is that again, the employment rate of women remains at a low of 42%, unlike the one for men, where it's almost reaching 70%. And during the phase of the pandemic and thereafter, this year already, you can see that the male employment has recovered to the levels that we have seen before the pandemic actually occurred. But this is not the case for women. This year, we count 13 million less employed women, and the trend apparently continues. So, but what we know, and this again has been studied by the ILO, is that actually global economic growth could be boosted by trillions, $20 trillion US, if women were educated and skilled at the same levels as men. So let me but there are also some encouraging news that I would like to share with you, some good developments, even in the global south, in developing countries. For instance, GIZ is working in the MENA region, in countries like Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, and Tunisia. And we have in the implementation of a project with companies. And those companies in those countries have realized that if they actually bring women issues much more forcefully into their human resources policies, that this can really have a double dividend for women, but also for the company's competitiveness. Our approach that we implement is an approach that fosters gender diversity management approaches, which means we try to improve the human resource policy, promoting the economic integration of women. with a focus on hiring, promoting, and retaining them. And the professional management of gender diversity is luckily increasingly perceived as a requirement for international competitiveness, which may lead then actually also to increase financial turnover of the companies. So if now the private sector goes into this direction, this is, of course, a huge advantage. What do we see in other countries that may perhaps be even poorer or more vulnerable? When it comes to the economic promotion of women, it's not only about the job or the economic opportunity, the smaller business that we could actually support them in establishing, but it's about the overall framework condition women are facing. A very key factor for women to become economic active and to stay in the business is actually the health situation and the access to good health services. Sometimes also through some kind of basic social security systems. Because normally women are more vulnerable and less resilient when it comes perhaps to economic shocks and if some kind of family issue may strike their life. So what we have to do when we try to strengthen the women's role in our economies and societies, especially when it comes to developing countries and emerging economies, we have to make sure that women actually get this type of broader public services that they depend so on. And additionally, we often speak about women's agency. And we think, what is actually key for the economic participation? And this has been already raised also in previous interventions. A key issue is actually knowledge and skills. So any investment, and Madam Minister has raised actually the specific intervention that actually were key at the Equality Summit, is actually to raise the knowledge and skills. First, starting with basic education for girls. Secondly, to actually have more girls to go to secondary schools and to receive skilled training. And then, of course, also the level of female participation in high-level education. In many countries, the data shows us that we are still not there from a very fair and I would say suitable level of participation. So within GIZ, considering the data within our data strategy, what we try to do, whatever we do, if we have an implementation project in the energy sector, in the transport sector, in the agricultural sector, we always try to disaggregate data and make sure that we inform our doing, and also when we advise decision makers, by really gender disaggregated data so that we have a clearer picture of their needs, the interests, the possibilities to create the right solutions. And so this is based, all we are doing on gender disaggregated data and very gender sensitive programming, taking into account all the social cultural factors that have diverse impacts on gender.
Thank you.
So our specific project that we are so happy to present at the Paris Peace Building goes actually way beyond this gender mainstreaming approach that is embedded on our company's DNA. We know that actually in many areas now, many new developments are underway in order to achieve sustainable goals. But the question is whether we do have a tool that can actually systematically analyze technologies in accordance with the sustainability and gender impact. So many times you see, this is nice technology, a nice digital tool, but it's really also the most advantageous for women. What kind of impact do we observe if we would apply it at scale? And the tech detector actually gives, this is available, of course, this is an open source tool, and makes it much easier to see what kind of specific impact the application of a specific technology may have on women's economic and social well-being.
Ingrid, I have to stop you. And
this is more or less, it's a tool for advising and for implementation, okay. And I invite you to have a look at it. Thank you so much, Edna.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. I will come with you in the second round of intervention, so you can conclude of what you have explained of your work. Alison is in the financial sector, and it plays a key role in empowering women and their entrepreneurship capacities. So, Alison, how do you break down systemic hesitation to invest in women-led business ventures? What are the ingredients for success to close the gender financial gap?
I wish
you
I
have
had
4 minutes.
No problem. I wish I had a great answer to that question, because I think we probably wouldn't need to be here on this stage. But to set a little bit of context on Village Capital and why we are doing this work, over the last decade, we've become one of the most active organizations supporting and investing in seed stage, impact-driven entrepreneurs around the world. And we say our mission is to reinvent the system to back the entrepreneurs of the future. And so what is the system that we're trying to reinvent? It's a system that leads to capital being concentrated in just a few people, a few places, and a few problems. When we look at problems, less than 20% of the companies that are valued at $1 billion or more are actually solving problems that matter most to helping people live healthy and productive lives. Sectors like food and agriculture, healthcare, financial services, education, those are sectors that are largely being neglected, particularly by early stage investors. When we look at places, 50% of all venture capital globally goes to just 3 states in the US, California, New York, and Massachusetts. We know that those 3 states are great. They have not cornered the market on innovation by any means. And then when it comes to women, if you look, for example, at the amount of capital that is going to women entrepreneurs in emerging markets at the seed stage, just 11% of early stage funding is going to companies with a woman on their founding team. So this could be a gender diverse founding team. We know that if we want to solve the big problems in the world and we're not engaging entrepreneurs and half of the population, we're not going to get there. So the fact of the matter remains, people don't really understand why, to the question, Edna, why this gap actually exists or how we can resolve it. So we looked specifically at accelerators and said, okay, accelerator programs are focused on helping entrepreneurs raise money faster and grow their companies faster. So we have to assume that it is benefiting women entrepreneurs. We partnered with the IFC, the World Bank Gender Innovation Lab under the Women's Entrepreneur Finance Initiative, and we actually found that accelerators are exacerbating the gender gap for women when it comes to raising equity, which was a huge surprise to us. And we really wanted to understand why. So we're really in the middle of doing that work, which is, one, to disaggregate the data to better understand, is it sectors that are a problem? Are entrepreneurs, are investors investing in sectors that are less likely to have women founders? No. Is it specific geographies? No. So we have 2 theses. One is that the presence of bias in the investment decision-making process continues to exist, and that's both explicit and largely implicit bias, as well as the presence of the perception of risk. So there has been a lot of other studies that show that women, when they are being evaluated for investment, investors focus on the potential downside and are asked questions about risk, whereas men are actually asked questions about opportunity and growth. And so we see an opportunity for accelerators to play a more active role in bridging that gap instead of, and understanding where and how they might be exacerbating that gap. So excited to talk more about it, but I know we have lots of great conversation to be had, so I'll pause there.
Thank you. Trisha, I think you have the overall view of these multi-stakeholders initiatives, and I want to ask you, how do you position women's leadership today in a multi-stakeholder framework for the change in ground?
Thank you, Edna, firstly, for just bringing us all together. I won't take it back too far. I'll just reflect on COP26,
okay.
Right? There's a census that's come out that says 500 fossil fuel lobbyists were delegates at COP26. And if that was to be equated at the ratio of them being a country, that would be the largest representation of delegates of a country, right? And in contrast, you saw exclusion of young climate activists, of indigenous activists, most of them being women, right? So we come to the question of representation. And here, the only formula that works, that has proven to work, France is a great example of this, is quotas. Now, when you talk about quotas, when you talk about affirmative action, they look at you with the dreaded M word. What about meritocracy? Right? But look around us. I mean, I don't mean this specific room, but if you reflect the current crisis of leadership that we are in, it's thanks to largely a gender that has reflected anything but mediocrity, right? It's mediocrity at best that is on display that we see when it comes to male leadership. And then they ask of us, like you said, this question about what about meritocracy? So the only thing we can push for is quotas and representation. If we are to, not just have a seat at the table as the token representation, but actually push for equitable change. This work is deeply personal because I'm from the global south, I'm Indian. Our current finance minister is a woman, which is really progressive. It's the first female finance minister we have had. But her appointment is as of 2019, I believe. Before that, we were going through an entire tax reboot. So we had state-wise tax infrastructure, and then we decided to go through VAT, which is the centralized tax reboot. So there was a finance consulting committee that was set up of all men, and they decided in all their amazing wisdom that they will have markers of wedding, your bindi and your bangles be tax-free, but menstrual hygiene products were not. And in India, out of 455 million women, only 12% of women have access to safe menstrual hygiene products. The rest, I repeat, 12%. The rest of them are forced to use unsafe alternatives like cloth, sand, ash, paper, which is leading to your face exactly, the face that you made exactly. That is the reality that women face. And it's leading to high instances of ovarian cancer with a direct link to poor health. It's leading to massive school dropout rates. The second leading cause for school dropout after forced labor is lack of sanitation, lack of access to sanitation. And the biggest factor is cost. We need to pinpoint it. The biggest factor for lack of access to menstrual hygiene products is cost. So we realize there's a clear problem in representation when they're having conversations about what should be tax-free and what should be considered as an essential commodity. We petitioned the government. They would not listen to us. We filed representations to many, many government agencies, the Ministry of Food, of Drugs, of Women and Child, every single portfolio you can think of. We figured out an argument and we petitioned to them. They did not care. They did not even respond. It wasn't until we launched the largest campaign globally till date on this issue on social media called Lahu Ka Lagan in Hindi, which is taking off the tax on menstrual hygiene products, and reached over 24 million impressions on Twitter in less than 24 hours, that it became a mainstream conversation and everyone started talking about it. We included all genders in this conversation, right? So you had people saying, oh, I'm packing for my luxury trip. Look at my luxury makeup, my luxury shampoo. Here's my luxury sanitary napkin, because that's how you're treating a necessity product. And soon enough, the government finally realized that this is an issue that is on the front stream of everyone's conversational point, and it was declared tax-free. Now, it was a massive success for us because we didn't even spend a single dollar to get this done. We did this without spending a single dollar. But the point is, it shouldn't have to be this difficult to make sure we can bleed with dignity and not be at high risk to ovarian cancer. So all roads lead back to accepting, when we say mind the gaps, which is the topic that we've gathered here under, and I think which is what President Macron has done a very good job of elucidating as well, is acknowledging first the issues, right? Everyone loves to talk about gender equality. Everyone. But the second you start talking about the inequalities, the violence women face, then people get uncomfortable. Then they want you to have sanitized conversations. Imagine the audacity. The truth makes you uncomfortable, but imagine what the person's body has gone through, right? Whose story you're sharing. So that's the reality we live in, where we have to be unapologetic feminists. And I'm sure we'll touch upon this soon, but With L'Oreal, the fact that you all talk about street sexual harassment, most people don't even want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But L'Oreal has been talking about that. You put out messages calling your ambassadors feminists. You know, that's the dreaded F word that a lot of leadership does not want to come close to. We have to address the problem. We name, shame them. We push for equal representation, rejecting this ridiculous talk about meritocracy, because we've given them numbers. We've also told them, when you invest in women, we invest over 90% back in the economy as opposed to 30% upwards of men. We invest back in healthcare, in infrastructure, in education, all of which is currently needed to, come back, recover from COVID. So we've tried the argument of it's the right thing to do. We've tried the argument of data to appeal to their conscience, to appeal to their intellectuality, but it doesn't seem to work. I think at this point, it's just basically saying, Google why you need to catch up with the reality of the world and stop making us do the hard labor.
Thank you very much, Tricia. We have around 20 minutes. I have prepared some questions for all of you, but I would like to hear your reactions. Instead of doing a very structured conversation, I would like that you feel free to react to what the others said. I like very much that we are creating a momentum for this agenda, and I really don't want to lose it. And you have talked about your areas of expertise, but how do we put all the pieces together to really have real transformation going on? I don't know which one of you want to take the floor.
I can take it.
Thank you.
Because thank you, Edna. I really love what Trisha's just said. When I was younger, I didn't want to be hired because I was a woman or because I was black or whatever. I just wanted to be hired because I was competent and capable and talented. I've been working for 30 years, and I do not see any progress, but I'm seeing things getting worse. Isn't it terrible? So I'm very glad that we managed to have a bill that is going to force the acceleration of this gender equality. Because, Trisha spoke about representation. I don't want to have women on boards or women at COMEX or women in management position just to have a beautiful picture. And by the way, I wish we had men in this table, because there is no way we can fix this problem of inequalities, of discrimination, of violence without having men at the table. And the thing, I'm always frustrated when we see this kind of discussion happening between women. We know what's happening. We know what we are suffering. We need men to understand what's happening. And I just want to salute the few men who are in this room, because men are also fathers, they are husbands, they are brothers, they are whoever they are, but they have a game to play on these inequalities. And the reason why it is important that government take some strict decisions, even through law, to make these things happen, is because otherwise it will never, ever happen. If you do not have women in position of leadership to speak about all the things that regard them, nothing will happen. We have spoken about menstrual vulnerability. It is the first time in France we have a president that decides that it is a question of human dignity that women can bleed naturally. Without bleed, none of us would be in this room. So how come we do not take these things seriously? And France has decided to invest 13 million so every single woman can bleed safely, and we have no girl not going at school because they fear for their health and what people can say. So I think representation is important. I think it's important to take laws. We have voted 10 years ago a law, Copé-Zimmermann, that says we want more women on boards. It took us only 10 years. 10 years to move from 9% to 45% women on board. Without this law, we wouldn't be where we are today. So the law that Marie-Pierre Rixin and Christophe Castaner have managed with the majority at the National Assembly is fundamental because it protects not only the woman in situation of vulnerability. If you are a single mom, you have 3 kids, and you cannot find a place for them to be taken care of, you cannot work. And then you live in poverty. If you are a young girl and you do not study on the STEM, knowing that 1 job out of 3 that will be created in the 5 coming years will have a tech component. If we have less and less girls studying in this field, then you will have algorithm managed by men for men. So these are real serious issues. And again, the reason why I'm defending quota now is not to have beautiful women on the picture. It is because we need women at every single table of decision. Every single decision made around the world concerns 52% of the humanity. How come women are not at the table when we speak about conflicts? We are not at the table when we speak about climate. We are not at the table when we speak about health. But we are confronted to these injustices. So more than preaching for having more women here and there, we see it's not working. I just want to have women in power.
I'd love to pick up on that point about power, because a lot of the work that we've done is to rethink power structures. We've pioneered a model around peer review based investment. So we put entrepreneurs together to make decisions on who should receive investment. That has led to a far more gender diverse, but also diversity from experiences, racial background, geographies. And the reality is, if we don't rethink power in the investment space, we're never going to change what's happening. At the end of the day, the people who have the most power right now are the people who have capital. Well, most of the people who have capital are men, largely white men, making those decisions. And there's nothing categorically wrong with white men, but we tend to make decisions to invest in people that look like us, that act like us, that talk like us. That is human nature. We need to change who has power, who has control of capital at all sort of sectors of the hierarchy and all sectors of the capital stack if we're actually going to change anything. And we need to change the way we think about decision making. Who has a voice? Who has a role in decisions? People with lived experience have a huge opportunity and a role to play in being activists, in solving problems. If we want to solve the big problems of our time, if we don't have all the people at the table, if we don't have half the population at the table, we're never going to make it.
And if I may just add one thing to what just Ali said. It's not a question of fighting. It's not, it's not a question of domination. It's not that women want to dominate men, or it has nothing with that. It's just a question of justice. It's a question of social justice. And for companies, I'm sure Barbara is going to speak about it. There are thousands of studies showing that companies that are more inclusive are more performant. Thousands of studies. And I'm convinced that the companies that will succeed in the future are the ones that are really thinking about diversity. Again, not to be kind or nice, but because it is in favor of their performance and duration. So really, one message, it's not a question of fight between men and women. Asking for more rights to women doesn't take anything from men, anything. It's just a question of human dignity, because Hillary Clinton said that human's right is also women's right, but they have been forgotten for too long.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I would like to hear Ingrid, because she has collected a lot of evidence, and we need evidence and the work you have done to change the narrative. To change the understanding about women's role in economics, in the financial system, and how the participation of women it has to be in an equal terms, but also they benefit, they generate value to society.
Absolutely, but I also would like to agree with those who have said that we have actually, over the last couple of years, we have collected a lot of data on the economic value of bringing women more center stage to our economic processes, to our societies. So the data is there, and we can create more evidence. I raised one point, but the question is whether this actually leads to a better decision making at the national level. And there, of course, there are a lot of issues come into play. There might be one issue, for instance, right now during the corona pandemic, that people see, look, I have first to think about getting the recovery done. And I wouldn't care, so much about gender sensitive measures, which is a wrong thing to do, because finally, this is not going to pay off in the medium and longer term. And we know this, like, women are so decisive for the human capital building, for the well-being of societies, of the future generations, and actually also in countries that are suffering from political crisis and conflict, women are such a key factor in really in forging peace and a more stable environment. All this has been analyzed, all this is well known, but sometimes through a crisis, actually, decision-making forgets what we already have at evidence at hand. The second point is actually, and there perhaps we come in, is that sometimes there are doubts whether you can specifically focus activities to women's role and whether this really pays off instead of a more mainstream approach. I can only say, and Trisha spoke about India, I would like to bring in a different kind of example from India that we actually experienced during the corona pandemic crisis, is that if you establish very focused gender-specific programs to help them to grow their business, to make them more resilient, to make them capable also to deal with the crisis and with a warm, volatile, perhaps market, you can see that women succeed. They have huge potential, and the numbers are there actually to create new business even through the crisis, because women depend on their own income. So what we can do perhaps much more to show to decision makers, look, this is doable. We have good practice at hand. It's something that we have already piloted. You can do this now at scale. You don't have to worry that this is not well invested money, which sometimes is actually an argument that simply is hiding other intentions and purposes. And finally, I think, and therefore this the summit was so important, as has been said by Minister. It's actually over many years. The thematic of gender equality was like a bit sidelines by other global agendas. I think if we really want to save the planet, if we really want to deal with climate change and global justice, we won't get there without actually considering the gender issues that are also at stake. When you look into the different sectors and into the solutions, you enter into the gender arena, and one has to recognize, to save biodiversity, to save our planet, to deal with water scarcity, you have to bring women into position to play their part more forcefully. And therefore, besides climate change, I'm just coming back from Glasgow, I think that the gender equality issue is the second most biggest challenge that we have to address in the future.
Thank you very much. You are ready to take the...
Yes, if I may just bounce back on what Asudmi said, and on behalf of the private sector, if I may say so. First of all, I'm so much with all of you. It's not about fighting against men. That's the opposite of the discussion of today. That's about exclusion. The today topic is about inclusion, and inclusion of the diversity in getting rid of the poverty of one archetype, but having the richness of those different diversities. And by the way, we are speaking about gender equality. I want to look at it in a broader way, because it's male and female, but it's also LGBTQ IR plus that have to be included into this vision if we want to look at the richness of the diversity. And to bounce back to your point, it's more than proven by thousands of studies, and you mentioned it by the founding, that being a company lead with diverse executive members, diverse leaders, is more successful, and by the way, in today's world, more attractive. Because we have also to look at what the new generation is looking at. I mean, what are men looking at when joining a company? The maternity leave duration, for example, is something they are really eager to look at. So the attractiveness to get the best talents in the diversity, but also the success of a company when it comes to private sectors, can only be achieved with this diversity. Everybody knows that. It's demonstrated, so it's at the time. But where you are completely right, it must be under law, under quota, under measurement, under audits. And was like you, I have 30 years in business, and I hated, beginning my life, my professional life, to be seen as the woman plant manager, then the woman in charge of operation, then the woman leading tech. It was terrible to me, and I hated to be seen as a number of the nice woman on the picture, and I hated quota. I changed my mind completely, and here I'm asking governments and different associations to push us, to measure, to be precise in our gap measurements and in our call for actions, and to be audited by third bodies. That's the only way to make it happen in a broader way of diversity.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, so please, Tricia, and then Alison, give your final remarks.
Thank you. Just speaking of paternal leave, I'm so glad you brought it up, because currently the US is actually talking about finally living in the real world and passing paid paternal leave, which we hope actually comes through. So it's good to see corporate take leadership when countries have failed thus far. I just want to slightly digress from what you have said. Not really, but when we say we're not fighting against men, it's true. But as people who identify as women, gender non-conforming individuals, we have all exchanged notes in the bathroom on watch out for that person can be difficult. We've all pretended to be on phone calls when walking in dark areas, talking loudly about, oh yes, I am here, just in case someone is going to try and harass us. We hold our keys here, trying to figure out ways where we can just access public places, work, without having to face sexual violence. I'm curious to know what the men are talking about. Because you all will all say, yes, we're for gender equality, but if you ask them, do you know any harassers in your circle? No, they don't. But most of the women, if not all the women, if not all the gender non-conforming people, have suffered sexual harassment. So the conversation must happen. And I say this with a deep sense of acceptance. In India, marital rape is not a crime. Right? We must talk about sexual violence, because when we talk about violence, we talk about in an othering format. The truth is, in India, at least over 97% of cases of sexual violence is by someone closely known to the survivor. It's not a stranger in a dark alley, and that's the case more often than not in all countries. And let me make it clear, even developing countries, right? I'm tired of people coming and asking me what is wrong with men in your country. At least we're having conversations as opposed to putting it under the blanket as you see in other countries. Now, when it comes to marital rape, you're basically telling someone that if your rapist is a stranger in a dark alley, you can report. If it's a person who you don't know, if it's an ex-boyfriend, you can report. But if it's your husband, he can get away with not respecting your bodily agency. And UN agency did a study that said 1 out of 3 men in India have admitted to having forceful sexual relations with their wives. So when I say this knowing that perhaps people in my family are also engaging in this kind of behavior. And it's an uncomfortable truth. But if I must ask for better, I must also acknowledge that there are problematic people within my own family spaces, that I myself engage in problematic conduct, right? So when we say we need to bring men to this conversation, yes, thank you. You have shown up here to the amazing people here. Thank you. But I really want to know, what do you talk about? when you'll have your conversations in your cigar clubs or whiskey bars, what do you talk about? Because I will tell you what we talk about. We figure out ways how we can survive, how we can, forget even thriving, just how we can survive without getting touched, harassed, groped, being called token representations, being called, oh, you're just here because you're black, because you're brown, because you're a woman, because you fill certain quotas. So our life is difficult, huh? And if you want to be there for us, which you must, then you need to start by having conversations about problematic behaviors that we are all engaging in and trying to unlearn them. Because if we don't engage in reality and in truthful spaces, we will lose people who are suffering every single day and do not even feel they can talk about the violence perpetrated against them by people known to them because of concepts of societal shame. People don't want to talk about it, and all of those factors.
First of all, thank you, Trisha. This is a hard topic to follow up. I'll keep it very, very short. One, I feel like it's really important as a white woman to say that we cannot have this conversation about gender equality if we don't talk specifically about women of color and the disproportionate, I know in the United States, the disproportionate impact in particular that the COVID pandemic has had, and really focusing on the privilege that we have as white women and the role that we have to play as allies to women of color and speaking out and speaking up. So I'll say that one thing. To bring this all together, I'm here because I believe that entrepreneurs have a huge role to play in solving the big problems of the world, and that women absolutely need to be at the table to solve those problems. And I think there is a role for all of us, whether we're in government, whether we're in philanthropy, whether we're in the corporate space, to support and rally around those women entrepreneurs. So that's my call to action today, is support an entrepreneur today. It's Global Entrepreneurship Week, by the way, so it's a good week to do so.
We have time for just one question. Who feel comfortable, take the floor if you feel comfortable responding it. How can civil society can contribute to generate proposals and raise the voice of the most vulnerable? How is your interaction with civil society organizations? Do you have communications? Do you think they have power to transform reality? I don't know who wants to answer the question.
Personally,
I'm from civil society, but if that's...
No, very quickly, there is nothing I can do without NGOs and associations. The best way for me to take the temperature of the floor, to know if we are going in the right direction or not, is to speak with these associations. And indeed, I speak with those women who are suffering, because they are the one, sometimes they don't even know what the solution is, but knowing that somebody from the government is listening to them is already a kind of supportive action. So one, I would ask women to continue to speak. The thing is, women used to speak, but very recently now they are heard, which makes a real difference. And the associations we work with are absolutely fundamental. I have visited a few of them just before coming to this panel, and we have beautiful associations working on data, working on sport and dance to recover when you have suffered violence. These associations are fundamental for our work.
I'll just be super quick because when I'm not doing this, I actually work in civil society in India. Just when COVID hit, we were on the streets protesting, and I'm a lawyer, and I showed up at the police station to provide legal representation for the most vulnerable communities to get them out of jail, and I was unlawfully arrested because I held on to my phone and I tweeted, I got out, I've been beaten by police, and I can tell you that I kind of don't agree with the premise of the question. Civil society is showing up, especially the most vulnerable, marginalized communities. They are showing up, they're protesting, they're putting their bodies at risk. Because that's one of the big things we do when we do the work that we do. We put our bodies at risk, right? Because that's a form of activism. What we need to demand for is for the leadership to show up for civil society to protect shrinking spaces. We've seen what has happened during COVID, where world leaders have used this as ground to arbitrarily arrest activists and shut their voices and also kill them. This is what I spoke about in the opening ceremony. And President Macron has shown incredible leadership when it comes to challenging his peers to, what are you doing? L'Oreal, that's why I keep going back to the work that you've done, where you platform activists who are speaking about these things. You as well. So, and Giz as well. So I don't think it's the onus on civil society. We are already sacrificing our sanity, body, minds, and our lives. It is the world leaders that need to step up for us.
Well, thank you very much for all of you. It was a great experience for me. I learned a lot, and I think that my takeaway for today's session is that the only way to ensure progress is by bringing together the experience, ideas, resources, and energy of the public, private, social, and international actors. Thank you very much for this fantastic panel, and thank you very much for your kind attention.